Welcome back, everybody, once again to the Late Night Review. And tonight I want to be talking about Bloodsport, one of my total absolute favorite movies of all time. A movie that came out in 1988. I was about 11 years old and saw this for the first time, and I was absolutely mesmerized by this. I was captivated. I became an instant Jean-Claude Van Damme fan. And then later I would go on to watch Cyborg and No Retreat, No Surrender. Even though he wasn't the star of that picture, I started to seek out everything that he did just so I could see him again and watch him. This movie was a big inspiration for me. I got a ton of nostalgia for it. I really, really do appreciate this and like it. And this, along with Cyborg, and over the years, my ratings, just in my mind, I've never made rating videos before. In fact, I'm just starting to make videos about movies in the last few months. I've been starting to make them, and so this is kind of new for me. Even though I like watching review videos, and I've seen a lot of good ones and appreciate them, and I've always had it in the back of my mind to do these. And even though this channel is supposed to be about my art, I thought, why not review movies that inspired me, movies that I really like. Now I'm just reviewing movies that I just plain like, whether they influenced my art or not. Bloodsport, I have a lot of nostalgia for it. I really like this movie. And I think Bloodsport and Cyborg, even though my tastes have changed over time, like every time Jean-Claude Van Damme made a new movie, that was my new favorite Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. Oh, when Kickboxer came out, that was my favorite. When Lionheart came out, that was my new favorite. When Double Impact came out, that was my new favorite. But I think over time, after I've settled down, I always go back to Bloodsport and Cyborg. Those are actually probably, even though it depends on my mood, what day it is, I might choose another Van Damme movie. But Bloodsport and Cyborg, I think, are my two favorite Jean-Claude Van Damme movies. I love Bloodsport, and Bolo Young is in here. I love Bolo Young. First time I saw him was in Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee, and he was Bolo, and pretty soon that name stuck, and they just called him Bolo. And really enjoy him. He really makes a great villain. And on YouTube, there's a lot of movies that you can watch of him that he did over the years, a long time ago. Old kung fu movies. I have a lot of nostalgia for old kung fu movies because I grew up renting all kinds of. They let me rent all kinds of movies, uh, kung fu fighting and all that. That's another story. But yeah, Bolo Young is in here, and that makes the movie even better. It's one of the many reasons I like this movie. Bloodsport inspired me to exercise even more, along with other movies. And like I explained in my workout videos, I come from a fighting family. So I was already, exercising, working out here and there, but I didn't really take it serious until a little later on in life. But yeah, Bloodsport was one of those movies. When I watched it, I just had to exercise, or it inspired me to exercise, put the ankle weights on my ankles and do kicks and all kinds of stuff I experimented with when I was a kid. And this was one of those movies where I just was very, very inspired by it. And I think it's well done. I think it's arguably one of the greatest martial arts movies of all time. And I wouldn't argue with anyone who had it as their number one. Sometimes it is my number one. That rating shifts from time to time. It depends on what mood I'm in. But this is a really great martial arts movie. Yes, the fighting's not exactly realistic, but for the time when it first came out, it was. For the time compared to other martial arts movies, it was fairly realistic, but it's a movie that is very well choreographed. I think Jean-Claude Van Damme is one of the greatest, if not, well, one of the greatest, if not the best, along with Bruce Lee and others, in terms of being a great on-screen fighter. I'm talking about selling a kick or selling a punch on screen, making it look interesting, making it look exciting. Um, his movies are very, very well choreographed, and the fights are done in such a way, especially his early films. When I talk about Jean-Claude Van Damme, I'm thinking about Bloodsport. I'm thinking about Cyborg. I'm thinking about Lionheart, Kickboxer, Double Impact. You know, all the movies that I grew up watching and all the movies that I really appreciate. And I think, as far as being an on screen fighter, selling that kick, looking athletic, you know, the build, he's always had a great build and really good muscularity, you know, making a fight scene exciting. I think he's right up there towards the top, if not the top, right up there towards the top in terms of selling a fight, not necessarily making it look realistic. You know, you're not gonna, I would never suggest, you know, doing high jumping spin kicks in a real fight. You know, that kind of stuff on the street, you know, would get you in pretty big trouble. But you know, I go into that with my exercise videos if you've seen those. But anyway, this movie is really, really a movie that I appreciate a lot. I think the fight scenes are exciting. I think the martial arts in here are really fun to watch. The athleticism, Jean-Claude Van Damme's a great athlete, so flexible, just a great all-around athlete. I grew up being a fan of his because of this movie, and then I saw others. Black Eagle was another movie I actually really like. It's pretty well. It's not really that well known, except maybe in the martial arts community. Or Jean-Claude Van Damme fans would definitely know it. No Retreat, No Surrender. Um, Movies like that. Not, you know, not very well done, but I enjoyed them and they were entertaining, especially No Retreat, No Surrender, I think. But Bloodsport, the Kumite, um, Roy Chow played the Senzo Tanaka. He was also in Enter the Dragon, and he played a role, I think a small role in Game of Death, and he does a great job as Senso Tanaka, Jean-Claude Van Damme. Frank Dukes' teacher in here, Jean-Claude Van Damme. And I really, really enjoyed this movie as a kid and still now. The rewatchability of this movie is really high for me. I can watch this pretty much any time. It's one of those movies where I never get sick of it. Along with Cyborg, I'll probably do, I'm thinking at least, doing a video about Cyborg in the future, because it is one of my favorite movies. I think Bloodsport and Cyborg are the two Van Damme movies that I keep going back to, but I love Double Impact too. Lionheart was my very favorite as a kid. And nowadays, I can't, you know, and then Double Impact came out after Lionheart, I believe. I was taken to the theater to see it, and then that became my favorite Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. But I keep going back to Bloodsport, and nowadays I think I prefer Double Impact more than Lionheart, even though I really like Lionheart. And then Bloodsport and Cyborg are my two favorites most of the time. When I was a kid, I used to watch this over and over again, and I showed my friends. We had a good time watching it. I like the final fight between Jean-Claude Van Damme and Bolo, and then the athleticism. And then Bolo makes such a good villain. He's always had a great bodybuilding legend in China. I mean, he just an amazing guy. There's a lot of YouTube videos of him on YouTube. If you get a chance, check him out. Just a amazing guy, amazing athlete. Always had a great build. Really happy that he's in here. And I actually, you can see his older movies on YouTube too, and they're worth checking out. And I think that those two together being in here was meant to be. It's just a classic martial arts movie. Even if you don't like martial arts, you might enjoy this movie, but especially if you do like martial arts, it's a well done movie. I think the acting is good for what it is. I think it's well put together. The music, the score is fantastic. It's the kind of music that you want to get up and do something, you want to get up and exercise, get up and work out. This movie pretty much has everything that you would want in a martial arts picture. I have a great time watching this movie. It's a lot of fun. And like I said in other videos in the past, if your movie entertains me, you know, if I see a movie that entertains me, it'll go way, way up. That's more important to me than being a well done production, you know, a high production, expensive production. You know, you have all the everything in place, you know, that's good. But this movie is really entertaining. That's even more important to me. But besides the entertainment, it's a well done movie. There's, you know, there's nothing wrong with the acting in here. There's a good supporting cast. Forrest Whitaker is in here. There's a lot of actors in here, and you know, actresses and actors that you had seen in other movies. If you watch a lot of movies, you've seen them in other stuff. So yeah, this movie pretty much has it all in my book. You know, some people can criticize this and that. Oh, the fight scenes aren't that realistic. But for the time when it first came out, it actually kind of was realistic, the way they shot it and the kumite, and saw the bones breaking, and, you know, the ways the fighters moved and the way they counterattacked, the way they set up their opponent. So it was kind of realistic for the time that it came out. But now in the days of, you know, MMA, and people have seen a lot more reality based stuff, you know, it doesn't really hold up in that sense. But if you want to see a fun athletic martial arts movie, a movie that's exciting, I would suggest this. You know, buy it, rent it, watch it. It's a really fun movie, and it's always going to be one of my favorites. This gave Jean-Claude Van Damme an audience, and it just grew and grew and grew as he made more films. And his presence, you know, he's got a lot of charisma. You know, just when I saw him the first time, you know, there's certain people that when you see them, you just know they have it. You know, the camera likes him, and it did here, and it did in his later films, especially the films through the 80s and then early 90s. So every time a new Jean-Claude Van Damme movie came out, I was so excited, so pumped. I know we used to have two VCRs, and I used to record movies on TV. And then every time a new Jean-Claude Van Damme a trailer would be released, a new preview of a new movie was doing, I would try to record it because I liked the preview so much. And so anyway, I got a lot of nostalgia for this movie and Jean-Claude Van Damme. And so if you haven't seen this, most people have seen this movie. But if by chance you haven't seen this, then you're in for a real treat if you're a martial arts fan. Even if you're not, it's still a good movie. But if you are a martial arts movie fan, you're really going to enjoy this, because I think it pretty much has everything that a martial arts fan would look for, especially if they're into the, you know, the kicking, high kicks, and all that stuff, the athleticism. I think you're going to enjoy it. So anyway, this has been the late night review, and check this movie out. And as far as this video goes, please like and subscribe and share it with other people so they can see some of these movies and these videos too. So have a good night, everybody, and take care.